Hi, my name is Kaley Roshitsh. I'm the editorial director at Cascale. Thank you to CFDA and LVMH for convening this exciting conversation on biodiversity. This is a pivotal year. Scientists have warned us repeatedly of surpassing climate limits. Just this past February marked a year-long trend of global temperatures above 1.5 degrees Celsius. We are all here to do better, and together we must. I'd love if we could introduce ourselves. We'll begin with you, Leticia.
Yeah, I'm Leticia Viveros. I'm Vice President of Sustainability at the Fresh Beauty brand.
I'm Christelle Capdupuy. I'm a VP for Sustainability at Vuitton.
I'm Preethi Gopinath. I'm the Director of the MFA Textiles program at the School of Fashion at Parsons and Associate Professor in Textiles.
Let's begin. How are we each defining biodiversity in the lens of the deepening climate crisis?
Well, I would say that, you just mentioned it. We are facing huge change in climate, in weather. And I think that biodiversity is probably one of the most essential levers to adapt on climate change, because obviously biodiversity and climate are really interlinked, as an example with the water cycle. So you can really fight against climate change by improving biodiversity, and you can adapt also, which is so important.
I recently read a description of biodiversity that I really liked. It was about a web of life. I think biodiversity is about how living organisms connect with each other and how they coexist. So, for example, biodiversity is not only about the quantity of trees you have in a forest or in a given area. It's about the different types of trees that exist and the other species or other living organisms and how they connect with each other and how they become more resilient when they are connecting and in balance. And that includes human beings, which is also very interesting.
Great build and resiliency, balance. Anything to add to that?
Beautiful description. It's just the variety of living organisms on the planet, right? And how we interact with each other. Humans tend to pull ourselves out of the world of nature and think we're other than, and then we talk about nature, but we're in it. And as Christelle was mentioning, the impact we have through our actions on the planet impacts biodiversity, impacts everything that's going on between the organisms and their ecosystems at large.
I mean, it's certainly, when you put it that way, it's really, imperative and that we work together and that we're always aligning on solutions. To build on that, Christelle, you said Louis Vuitton is committed to building a regenerative brand. What does that mean exactly, and what kind of developments are you keen to implement?
I think that Preethi already gave you quite the answer, because you were starting to talk about regeneration, right? But the thing is that given the fact that humanity currently uses approximately 75% more than what the planet can regenerate, means that efforts toward preservation will not be enough. So if we want to be a sustainable brand, a sustainable business, with really the definition of long-lasting, we do have to regenerate biodiversity, because as Louis Vuitton, most of our raw materials are coming from nature. So it's totally interlinked. We cannot be a sustainable business if we are not regenerating the ecosystems. So that's why we really want to target to be a regenerative brand.
And that synergy certainly aligns in the beauty world as well. Leticia, how are you strengthening this connection between people and planet and product?
That's very important for us at Fresh. Because our nature is really our destination for innovation. We source our ingredients that are key for the efficacy of our products from nature, and we are committed to preserving biodiversity then. And when I say biodiversity, it's really people and planet. So in our responsible sourcing journey, we decided to become members of the UEBT. UEBT is a nonprofit organization that is dedicated to precisely these two, biodiversity and people in the botanicals world, which is where we live and for our ingredients. And hand in hand with them, we go and verify our supply chain. So we go physically to the different places in the world where we source our ingredients, and we verify across 7 principles for people and planet, and we put in place improvement plans, which are really critical for us. It's a continuous improvement program. Next to that, we really want to give back to these regions. One thing is to make sure you are sourcing responsibly your ingredients and that you have this improvement plans, but also how do you maximize your impact. So we have created partnerships with different associations and organizations to give back to these communities and to nature. For example, our most recent one is with the UNESCO MAB. So MAB is the Man and Biosphere, so again, people and planet. This partnership is specifically in Mauritius. Why in Mauritius? Because it's where we source our tea extract for one of our key products, the tea elixir serum. And with them, we are working on removing 3 plants from the endangered list of species, the IUCN red list of endangered species. So it's plants that have nothing to do with our tea that we're sourcing. It's not ingredients from our supply chain, but are plants that are very critical to this biodiversity hotspot and even to the traditions of this beautiful island. So that's how we maximize our impact.
I definitely want to dive deeper into the supply chain in a minute, but to pivot over to the educational space, Preethi, what is the Parsons MFA textile program, and how are you nurturing these kind of creative partnerships and synergies and that intentionality with your students?
So as a person who worked in the industry for many years, it occurred to me that if you want to make a little change in the industry, it helps in a small way. But if you want to make a big change, then you impact the people going into the industry. So you educate them and you have them grow into the industry with the information that they need to make those changes in the world. And so the MFA Textiles program was founded at Parsons literally as a hybrid program between craft and technology on the foundation of sustainability. So everything that people do, and issues around social justice and well-being and beauty. So if you take those together and then you look at, regeneration is automatically a word because we are regenerating a craft technique. And what does that serve in the 21st century? Does handloom weaving make sense in the 21st century when we have machine-powered looms? We actually observe and then change. So what materials go in, what technology goes in. If I use an old technology, can I use a new material? And then we have students ask questions. And the entire basis of how we teach and our pedagogy, as we say, is to ask questions. And it's using the Socratic method of having open-ended questions in the context of the environment, in the context of human well-being, well-being of the planet, climate, and social justice issues. Can we use textiles to make those changes in the world? Because textiles are ubiquitous to our world, right? Whether you wake up on a sheet or you're wearing clothing, as most people tend to wear these days, or you're walking on a carpet, there's textiles everywhere. So we can make small changes in a tiny little thing called a fiber. You can impact the world in such a big way. And so the aim of the program is to ask big questions and answer it through tiny little changes that will impact the world at large.
See, I'm already feeling that encouragement, and I'd love to sit in one of your classes. Let's go with that kind of momentum, that curiosity. Let's pivot to impact. I'd love to know how, turning to the brands in the room, how you're measuring impact, and what ways are you tracking it? What kind of recommendations do you have for someone who's just getting started? Christelle, love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, to start with, I think it's definitely, the starting point. Because when it comes to sustainability or biodiversity management, sometimes, you just feel like, oh, that looks nice, let's do that. Just like, let's plant a tree, for example. It's not that simple at all. So for me, the key is the data, is the measurement, is the scientific measurement. You shouldn't take any decision without having some fact, some scientific fact, some data. And to come back to Louis Vuitton, for example, when you say, when we are talking about regenerating brand, what does that mean really? It's not just a concept, right? So, for example, at Louis Vuitton, we got something like 1,000 raw materials. You were mentioning textile. We got textile, we got the leather good, we got the shoes, the perfume, the jewelry. So we got 1,000 raw materials. So once you say that, is how are you going to deal with your impact on biodiversity through these raw materials? So for each of them, we identify the right environmental certification, not the easiest one, but the most impactful. And then we are targeting by 2025 to reach 100% of these 1,000 raw materials to be whether recycled or environmentally certified. And so we reached already 86% at the end of 2023, after 4 years, because we work collectively, and we'll come back to that point later on, because we cannot, we cannot succeed in this change if we're not working all together. It's not just the sustainability team deciding something. You got to work with the marketing, the designer, the industrial team in order to reach. So definitely, in a nutshell, it's super important. That's the starting point. And really, it's all about taking decision based on fact and not just about idea,
No, absolutely. Everything needs to be, data-driven,
Yes.
fact-driven. Leticia, anything to build on that?
For us at Fresh, an aspect that is very important to measure is our eco-design. So to have scientific proof that we are developing products that are respecting the environment. So for several years now, we have been measuring that for our formulations. And now we are also moving into doing life cycle assessments of our products, where we can quantify and track the impact of the products in their whole life cycle. So from the moment you are sourcing the ingredients to their manufacturing to the distribution of the product, all the way to when the consumer is using the product at home and throwing away perhaps some of the packaging. So we want to understand the life cycle and be able to measure and understand the footprint. And we will also start measuring the biodiversity footprint of some of our key products, to then be smart when we're taking decisions and to be able to then monitor our actions and our decisions through time. So that's something very important. And regarding what you were saying on what we would say to organizations that are starting, I think it's important to, yes, generate the data and understand your footprint, where you are before going into the action. I recommend doing a materiality assessment, a double materiality assessment, perhaps to identify those key areas, because sustainability is so large and there's so much to do that you could get lost in thousands of projects. So how do you identify those that are the key ones where you will really have the most impact for your ecosystem? So that has been really key for us to identify priorities and move on, and then define KPIs, and then monitor performance, and then perhaps disclose the results.
Oh, absolutely, and my peers would absolutely hound me if I didn't mention the work that Cascale is doing too with the Higg Index and really broadening that common measurement approach. So certainly agree that life cycle assessment and that granular approach really matters, and it matters to what you were saying earlier about those kind of, take those first steps, have that first question. In the academic space, do you also see that there's a method for measuring success or impact, and what does that look like, or what are some examples?
So actually, I should say the word sustainability is so overwhelming if you look at all the things you have to deal with, and the fact that, at Louis Vuitton, they're actually measuring the impact in so many spaces, 1,000 different materials. It's the place of overwhelmingness that we sort of have to dissipate in an academic space. So it's often giving a small assignment and then growing it to see how that small thing that is done, that small action, has a huge impact on multiple processes, right? So systems are then, we teach design in the form of systems by the time students are in their second year. So now they're not just looking at me and my world and my impact on that one little thing. It's about how it impacts areas, processes, from sustainable sourcing of that very material that's then going into a sustainable production of something, to then what product it is, and then what happens to the end of life of the product, to its recycling, its repurposing, its upcycling. So one of the ways we end up measuring it, of course, is at the end when they graduate and get a degree, but they don't get that degree or are not able to graduate unless they come up with something that has been thought through at the level of minutia, but is applicable in a large space, in a larger systems space. So we have students who have taken plastic bags, made it into yarn. And when I say plastic bags, I mean literally garbage bags. In New York, you walk on the street, that's one of the things that hits you, right? And they, during the COVID pandemic, literally lopped off the tops of plastic garbage bags, converted into string. How do you convert plastic bags into string? So she hacked a gadget because what else do you do when you're home during COVID? And then made it yarn and has been able to make it into cloth that actually feels good. And then seen what it can do in terms of garments, in terms of home furnishings, in terms of materials you would use where. As we talk about sustainable means it has to last long, whether it's a system lasting long or the material lasting long. We have to look at all aspects of it. So we measure it by what comes out of the work, what students are producing. And there's some incredible invention, not just with material, but also with systems. And I think when the process makes a change in the world for the better, then that's a successful product or process.
And absolutely that career path too, and seeing that longevity, a sustainable career path for these students who have these brilliant ideas is so crucial as well. So definitely keeping an eye on that as well. Pivoting now to design and upstream engagement. Christelle, this one's for you. Louis Vuitton has prioritized, for one, raw material sourcing in reducing its Scope 3 emissions. What progress has been made thus far?
Well, do you have 1 hour?
Right, it's a hard pivot.
Because I was listening to what you were saying in terms of systemic approach, which I do believe in, and it's part of the answer, right? But also before I was mentioning what we're doing in terms of recycle, raw material, but that's not enough. What I mean is that if you are using a tank, let's say, of recycle and environmentally certified material, you say, oh, that's great, look at what we're doing. But then if at the end to produce 1 bag, you are using the equivalent of 3 bags and then just throwing the equivalent of 2 bags, it's totally nonsense. So that's what you were mentioning in terms of systemic approach, which I do believe in. Now, to come back more specifically to your question, we are now really working hand in hand with the designer, because if you want to have a systemic and sustainable approach, you have to have an impact on the very first step of the design, because you have to think not the end of life, but the end of use of your material. So you are mentioning long lasting. I mean, at Louis Vuitton, we are designing to last. I mean, we want our bags to last for 100 years, so minimum. So we do have to think repairability as an example. So if you want your product to be repairable, you have to think about it at the very beginning to make it easy to repair, as an example. And then we can talk also about upcycling. If you want your product to be upcyclable, let's say, you have to think about that once again at the very first step of the design. And now today we are also studying when we are dismantling a product to see how easy it is. And to give you an example, we had some trainer, we had still some trainer on stock, and we're starting to dismantle them. And then we realized how difficult it was to separate, for example, the sole from the upper sole. So we made some research and we decided to use, for example, another glue, which is really easier, to make it really easier to dismantle, because then you can reuse again the sole and you can reuse the upper sole. So it's really about, working together with the designer in order to think globally the product and to think about, we have these beautiful materials. I mean, we do have to respect that. We do have to use it. I mean, even if the product is not sold, well, we dismantle it and then we will remake some product. So once again, totally agree with you about the systemic approaches. And that's what makes it complex. I mean, you are mentioning also the work you are doing with your student, because it's not so simple. It's not just black or white. It's not just about, once again, using recycled raw material and say, oh, that's great, we did our part.
In that design approach that you're speaking of, what can designers learn from this? Is it as simple as just, think about what you're making, or what is that kind of advice that you have to share?
Well, I mean, there are different answers to this question. First of all, as I was sharing with you, I mean, the new generation of designers, they want to be part of it. And it's not just clicking the box, oh, we are sustainable. They really want to be part of it. They want to be part of the change. They want to be part of the needed shift of everything we do when we are a brand like Louis Vuitton. So that would be my first answer. And the second is that it's really a new kind of creativity. You have to be super creative, because then you got a kind of frame. Sorry, guys, you got 3 materials. Then you got to design a bag. Oh, wow, you got to be super creative to think differently. And that's not the blue 3.1, that's the blue 3.2 that we got on stock. So what are you going to think of? What are you, design to make it, super interesting and super trendy, you know. So for me, it's really that. It's really, first thing, it's they want to be part of that. They want to be part of this shift. They do believe in sustainability as at the heart of a strategy of the brands, whatever brand, Louis Vuitton, French, and not even just LVMH, but all the brands have to shift the ways they are doing. And it's really a source of creativity, definitely.
I love that. No, I think you're exactly right. Sustainability really is a problem of creativity, or you know, a challenge of creativity. I love that. And you know, in the beauty space as well, it's certainly a challenge of creativity. I think something we haven't touched on, we touched on the product a lot. I'm curious to hear more about the you know, sustainability ethos as it relates to packaging.
So in packaging for us, we are on a journey. I believe we are at the beginning of a journey, but with a lot of steps already running the last very few years. We started the journey in 2021 and transformed basically all the components of our different packaging materials. Right now, 87% of our products have packaging components that are designed either designed to be recycled or have recycled content in them. That means, for example, 85% of our glass has recycled content. 98% of our plastic tubes have recycled content as well. And for plastic bottles, we are also on the way to soon achieve 100% of bottles with recycled content. Every time we design or renovate a cardboard or paper box, we make sure it's FSC certified, meaning we are assuring it's responsibly sourced from the way we manage the forests where this paper is coming from. We are right now crafting our ambition for 2030, where we want to take circularity to the next level. It's still a long journey, but as I said before, I mean, working all together internally from the moment you design the product and with all the different functions and with our suppliers, it is possible.
And you mentioned it, we're staring down 2030. Certainly those goals are close approaching. I'd love to hear and stay with you for a minute and hear more about the you know, supply chain improvements that you have made to not just your hero ingredients, your hero products, but you know, what does that process really look like? It's certainly not all you know, roses.
It is a tough journey, and it's again a lot of players working together for the same cause. I like an example of a lotus plant that we use. We have lotus skincare collection that uses lotus as a key ingredient, and this we source from a 10-mile creek farm in Alabama in the US. And it has been great to work with them, hand in hand really with the farm, and to see the improvements. So to give you an example, some of the work we have been doing together with them is on water, on monitoring the quality of the water in the farm, but also like what goes to the surroundings of the farm. And not only the monitoring that the quality is right for our lotus or for whatever the farm has, but as well for all the living things around, for the insects, the animals that live in the area. So that's one of the key actions that we saw the change and the improvement. The other area that we have been working with this farm is on renewable energy. So they were already monitoring their energy consumption, but we saw opportunity to optimize their energy consumption and to move to renewable energy with installing some pumps that are solar, and that has really had an important impact to their greenhouse gas emissions. The third area is on that we work with them was on their workers' contracts. So also the people end. In that state, basically no agricultural workers have contracts. So we are working with the farm on having for their full-time employees having contracts that are very clear to protect them and that are really working on obviously human rights, but also regulations, and that it's a clear relationship with a clear framework. Thanks to these improvements and changes, we have been, with this specific farm, we reached the level of ethically sourced in the UEBT that I was speaking about before. We reached this, which is the highest level. This is what we want to do with all our ingredients. This is the journey, but it's something you have to come back. I mean, it's not a one-off and you go and that's it. And with the changes in the world and all, you have to go back and see and put in place improvements and work hand in hand. It's not like us doing the work or them doing all the work. It's developing this relationship together.
Anyone want to build on that? I think that was, a huge point. Christelle?
Yeah, I think that totally aligned with you. And coming back also to the systemic approach, you have to go beyond the value chain. And when you are talking about the supply chain, we do have to control our entire value chain. We do have to know exactly where our environmental and social impact. And in our brands, for example, when you got some very complex brand, the value chain can be quite long, let's say. We have some tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4, so sometimes it's quite difficult, but it's absolutely essential to know that, to understand that, and totally agree with you in the way that we do have to shift the way we are working inside our value chain, but we cannot say we are working on our environmental and social impact if we are not working with our suppliers for them also to be able to shift. And most of the time they want to shift, but they don't know how, they don't know where to start. So it's really our responsibility to help them to shift. And I was listening to you talking about the renewable energies, and that's also what we are doing at Vuitton, working with our at least tier 1 and tier 2 suppliers in order to help them to shift to renewable energy, as an example, to shift to regenerative agriculture. I was talking about a regenerative brand before, regenerative agriculture, and I'm sure Fresh is also working on that. It's a kind of agriculture which will allow the soils to be really more lively. And if you've got a lively soil, well, it will be also fighting against climate change by really having an active part in the water cycle. So definitely, and there we are not the one deciding. We have to work with our suppliers because they're not supplying just Louis Vuitton, just Fresh. So that's also a totally new way of working, sometimes with competitive brands, because we do have to work together in order to help the supplier to shift.
And extremely important as you're all speaking, it's so inspiring to hear that there is vision out there at the highest levels of corporations, because then our students have a place to go when they graduate. Otherwise, as you said, creativity doesn't happen in a vacuum. You need those constraints. You need to know there's people interested in conquering those problems and dealing with challenges at that level. So it's really inspiring to hear. I would say, though, we have a student who literally developed dyes using bacteria to reduce water consumption of dyes by 90%, right? So can you imagine if we could start at that small, tiny level of changing what color systems are used to dye materials and reduce natural resource consumption? So in case of production of any sort, the systems involve, in any economy, in any production, you're dealing with labor, you're dealing with resources and capital. So with those three in consideration, where is the best place to put capital becomes important. And then what are the values that we ascribe to labor? Yeah. Who's making their livelihood, their entire living system is part of the biodiversity within another ecosystem, right? So I think just the fact that companies like this are paying such careful attention, and that we, through education, are able to raise awareness enough that they're excited to be working in these spaces. I think it just goes to show collaboratively we are getting together and doing some good in the world.
You brought me to my next question of, what commitments or investments are needed to sustain these communities and close the necessary gaps. And please speak to it, whether it be, workers in the supply chain, whether it be students, or so whoever wants to take that on, I think it's so important.
Well, I think that to start with, we are in a totally new world. We're not in the 80s anymore. Huh? Mm-hmm. So it's not companies on one side, schools on the other, and supplier. That's totally old school. Mm-hmm. And because once again, the business cannot work like that. We've been experiencing that for 5 or 6 years now, So the move to make is so huge that we cannot do it by ourselves. So I don't have the specific answer to your question, but to start with, as an example, at Vuitton, we are working a lot with schools. We spend quite some time talking with students, and not at sustainability MBA. Huh? It's more at product designing, marketing, because these students want to know more about it because they know it's the future. They know that a marketing position will mean a sustainable marketing position, So for me, it's really about that. And as you were talking, Leticia, also about the suppliers, once again, to come back to that, that's also something we are doing today at Vuitton. We got some dedicated days, and I'm sure you do the same, where we are gathering our suppliers for metallic pieces, our suppliers for leather, our suppliers for cotton, and they are competitors. But they know that if they're not working together, they won't make it. So for me, it's really collaboration, collective approach.
Yeah, I think you said the key also in terms of education and awareness. For me, sustainability, even if it's an urgent matter, it's still misunderstood. I think there's not enough information out there, or the information has been that is out there feels very scientific. So we need to bring it to everyone in the different organizations. We need to bring it to students. Young people are interested, so let's also give them the information. And it's the same with students, but also new generations of farmers, like in the case of the ingredients we source. These new generations need to understand why we care so that we can all work together on this. I think this awareness, engagement, education is really critical.
But they are also the ones who are challenging us a lot. Huh?
Yes.
Bringing
information, so we also need to listen. Yes.
But I love the word care, right? The idea of caring is really important because you may be aware and then it's a so what, or I can't do anything about it. And there can be a growing apathy towards these things. But I love the fact that we are all able in our own spaces to generate the care for the fact that these facts exist, climate change is happening, or water resources are fading away. We can all keep saying it as factual, but what moves somebody to do something about it and to focus their time and their attention, their money? Going to school now is so expensive, especially in the States right now. So why would they focus on taking care of the planet? Is it my problem? And the point is yes. And I think a lot of the times the questions we ask in the classroom are, why? Because I like? That's not good enough. It's because I care about something. It's because I would like to address something and therefore raise awareness or do things consciously. Make with consciousness, whether it's a material or a process or a system. Where am I going to invest my time? What is worth caring about? Those are the questions we can ask so that by the time they're in industry, they're naturally thinking that way. And so creativity is sparked, but then it gets paid for in the industry, right?
I like that a lot better than I was going to say just money on the table, but it's like care behind the money to fuel those investments. What were you going to say?
No, what I want to say is that what is super powerful is that I think we reached the time when caring and business are together. What I mean is that 10 years ago, you would like to work in sustainability as an example because you wanted to change the world and you wanted to care about the environment. But today, the companies know that without taking care of that, the business is going to be super complicated in 10 years' time. So today, and that's why I was listening to you and just sharing that it's super powerful because if you've got both of that, that's when change can happen.
Absolutely. Well said. Well, rounding it off with one kind of final question to you all. This has been so engaging, so thank you so much for being here. The emphasis, continues to be on collaboration, that care, that very intentional approach. What is one thing our viewers can take away from this conversation to help drive collective action at scale?
Well, I think it's difficult to summarize that in one answer.
I think I would say start small. Start where you can, so that it's not overwhelming. The question is large enough that we were a little stumped when you asked it. But the point is start where you are, start where you can, start with how you can. And then talk, collaborate, ask the right questions, be okay with not knowing the answer. I'm going to quote Socrates here, of all the people from 300 BC, who basically said, rest in the unknowing and then accept, I don't know this. Now what can I do to find out? We live in a digital information world, right? Everything is so-called at your fingertips. But how do you assess that from data, information, knowledge, and then shift it to wisdom? That shift to applying knowledge to become wisdom, where people are then impacted positively, including yourself. You don't have to exclude yourself as the maker or as the designer or as the business person, but to consider well-being and do it beautifully, do it through beauty. That's the key to happiness ultimately, right? Why do we need or want beautiful things around us? You look at a beautiful work of art, beautiful material, a beautiful product, you can't help but smile, right? It brings you happiness and joy. Ultimately, that's what every single human on the planet wants, to be happy, to have the means to be happy, and to live in a space where there is a certain element of harmony. And what does that mean? Harmony with biodiversity, harmony with the non-natural, like the products we often end up carrying around in our hands. And then what happens to all of that for the next few generations? So it's not just about this generation. I think Chief Seattle said at some point that we are here as custodians of the planet. So we don't own, we're barely renting. We're basically here to take care of the planet for the next generation. And if our students, our young people are in that space, if they are getting an education that shares that with them, then it's for them to carry that wisdom into the world that they have now inherited from the rest of us.